Oh, it's right there. Okay. I just want to say good morning again. I woke up at 4 a.m. this morning. I couldn't sleep because I slept really early, so I guess that's my fault, right? And but I'm so blessed to be here. I'm really blessed to have Tita Ding and Tita Allen just really welcome me all the time, just to invite me here. Last time I've been here, I don't even remember, was that 1 or 2 years ago? I wasn't even married yet. And so I could have my wife stand up in the back. Remy. And we're going to be celebrating our 1-year anniversary next month. So it went by so fast. And I'm just really blessed to have her in my life and support me. And with a lot of my crazy views. And you know, it's nice to have a wife that doesn't think you're crazy unless we're both crazy. You know, and there's a lot that I've been learning. And I've been realizing, you know, even I've been preaching radical grace, and this church has been preaching radical grace. Sometimes we feel like, oh, I think I get this now, you know. And then I started reaching a point where I'm like, I don't think I get all of this now. I think I'm getting confused again. And you know what? It's okay. I don't think we're supposed to understand God completely. And so I think one of the best questions that you can ask a person is, where are you at on your journey with God? Because you're not going to have it all together. And that's what I've started to realize, that it's not about who's saved and who's not saved, and we're this special class, this group that God has chosen. And you know, this morning I heard a sermon on YouTube. It was just uploaded several hours ago, so I just decided to click on it. And it was by a famous pastor that I'm not going to mention his name. But when I heard it, he was sharing the gospel. And the only way that I could really understand and interpret it is that it was a gospel of condemnation. And he was yelling at the crowd, really making them feel bad for their sins. And I was thinking, is that the gospel that people are preaching? And this is a very famous pastor. He says, this is a gospel that we're telling the whole world. And he kept hammering it in. You have to believe, you have to believe, you have to believe. And then you'll be born again, and you'll be converted. You need to receive Jesus Christ so you'll have this changed life. You know what I would like to do with those types of pastors? I would like to take a bunch of all these pastors. I don't care if they're famous or not famous, but if they keep hammering it in about how much you need to believe, and they're always pointing out people's sins, I would like to take these pastors with me, take them to a special home with a bunch of severely mentally retarded people, a bunch of babies that are lying around, a bunch of people in hospitals that are in a bunch of comas, and have them preach their good news gospel. And you know what? It's not going to be good news anymore, because those people can't do anything. And in fact, it would ultimately be called bad news, because they're damned with this type of gospel that we're preaching around the world. Of course, it's not everybody, but this is the dominant understanding, the predominant view of how we understand God and Christianity. And that breaks my heart, folks. You know, I've been here in the Philippines for about 3 years, a little bit over 3 years, and only some of them know, but I'm leaving. I'm moving back to the States for a while. But it's such a blessing for me to hear that this community, Radiant Life Church, is really preaching that I believe is a true gospel. It's not because we're special, but it's so simple, right? And so I'm just so encouraged that once I go, that this message is going to continue to spread. Because just like this church is called Radiant Life, I believe this message will reign. This is just the beginning. And just so you don't feel alone, more and more people are getting a hold of this revelation that we're preaching here in this country. You know, I was just thinking about how much I don't get it sometimes. How you know, I have all these rabbit trails that I follow sometimes. You know, I'm like, I'm hearing this person say this on Facebook and YouTube, and then you start getting confused again a little bit, right? So there's all these different types of theology, but one thing that I know for sure is that God is good, that God is love, that God does not hate you, that you are not in danger. Okay? These are what I'm hearing from a lot of famous preachers around the world talk about. But I want you to answer this question. Is this a good story? We all like stories, right? Now answer this question for me. Is this a good story? This is what we call a Bible story. God creates billions and billions of people. Adam messes it up. affects the whole world. Right? So what does God do? Because He's very smart, He sends His own Son to die on the cross for the whole world, and yet only a few make it. And in fact, the majority of His creation is going to be burning in all eternity. Right? For billions and 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 billions of years, the majority of His creation will be burning. Is that a good story? And so I'm not trying to tell you that I'm a universalist, okay? I'm not saying that the cross is, I'm not saying that all religions are valid, that doesn't really matter what you believe. What I'm trying to say, what I'm starting to understand is that the cross is a lot bigger than we think. Right? The cross is a lot bigger than we think. And so let me just tell you first what is not the gospel. Okay? Now, what I'm going to share, I don't think so that it's going to be too shocking, because I spoke with Tito Ding. I was talking to my wife, Kanina, earlier, and I was asking her, you know, I wonder what people are going to say about this message that I'm going to share, because it's a bit of a stretch, okay? Or at least, especially here in the Philippines, man. Even people who believe in the radical grace message don't hold to what I'm going to be sharing to this morning. And that's why I asked Tito Ding, I said, I'm going to need a lot of time, because I'm going to really need to unpackage this, because it's going to really throw people off. It's going to raise some eyebrows here and there. But as I was talking to Tito Ding at the MRT station, it seems like you guys are headed in the same direction. Okay, but there might be some new folks. But here's what I want to say. There might be some of you who have been hearing some of these messages from Pastor Robert and them, and who knows if it's making sense or not. But my hope is that if you disagree with it up here in your mind, I hope that when you leave this service, that if it still doesn't make sense theologically up in your head, I hope my message will haunt you. That I hope that you start looking at the world, at this message of grace that I'm going to be preaching, and it's going to haunt you because you know deep down in your heart it makes sense. And this is a very interesting thing, that theologically we have this understanding of God being a certain way, that God is very angry, He's going to judge you, He's very narrow-minded, etc. But yet the way we relate with people is very different. We're more loving. We're more forgiving. But yet God is not. There's something wrong there. And that's why I'm trying to show that the true gospel that you will live out will be your understanding of who God is. That's why I don't blame a lot of these preachers that are very harsh, they're very angry, that are very critical, and judging people and damning people to hell, and even telling some people that God hates them. Because at least you have God to have your back, right? Because He hates them too. And yet this is what we call the good news to people. Now, this is the way the gospel is typically laid out. And just nod your heads if this is how you've heard it. We always start off like this. God is a holy God. That's the way you always start off. You don't start off with God is love. You'll always start off with God is a holy God in a legal sense. And I'm going to explain to you guys what that means. Then you say, because God is a holy God, you sinned, therefore you became guilty. And because you became guilty, and God is a holy God, somebody has to pay for your sin. Justice has to be served somehow. So because God is holy, He sends His one and only Son to take upon your shame, your guilt, your full punishment. And what He does, that with the sacrifice of Jesus Christ, it appeases God's anger, His wrath. So then therefore justice is served. Right? So therefore there's that part in the Bible where it talks about where Jesus says, my God, why have you forsaken me? So people would say, see, that's the point where the Father, because He's so holy, He can't look upon sin. He turned away from His Son. He turned His face away from His Son in order for the Son to suffer the full punishment for the sin of the whole world. Now all of a sudden, all of God's wrath, all of God's anger was put on His Son for you and for me. Does it sound familiar? Even some radical grace preachers preach that type of gospel. Okay, so because of that, because Jesus Christ died and saved us from the Father's wrath, therefore, all we have to do is believe now. Then all of a sudden we become saved. Right? Is this making sense? This is what we've been taught. Folks, that's not the gospel. That is not the gospel.